There's no Black person in Pensacola that has held a position of chief or sheriff before me. When you say, hey, what's the current landscape of law enforcement? You know, if I had to sum it up real quick, I'd say it's like trying to grow green grass. No matter where you are in this world, if you got a house, everybody visualize their house with a clean, manicured lawn and green grass. But you can't grow grass the same way everywhere. You know, we want the same results, but how we go about getting it, you know, some things may be fundamental, but other things are going to be uniquely different because of the demographics. And that's, if I had to describe law enforcement, it's like trying to grow green grass everywhere. And so everybody's not going to have the same challenge, but we all need to understand that there's some fundamental challenges and there's some things you got to do, and they got to be consistent no matter where you are. Going into law enforcement, there's a lot of self-centeredness in leadership, and it's forgetting the people who actually get the work done. It's forgetting the things that is important to them, having a safe work environment, having the technology needed, as opposed to just the things that people want. So if they really look at the, you know, the cross-cultural awareness that's needed, people need to know the history of relationships, not only in community in general, but in different communities, different cultures. How have law enforcement been viewed historically? You know, what needs to change? And then the changes are pretty fundamental, because if you're treating everybody on an equal plane in terms of being treated like a human being, then that's going to solve a good portion of the problem. The other thing is getting people out of the profession that don't respect that as a value. But we've seen over the last 3 decades an environment created to keep people like that in there. You know, and so understanding that as a working environment, as a leader, you know, you got to learn how to manage those kind of behaviors. You got to learn how to manage those personalities. And strict adherence to rules is one of the ways you manage it and you hold people accountable.
Have you met any racist police officers? And if so, how did you deal with that?
Yes, they're in there. They're in there, and anybody say they're not, they're just lying. Okay, so now how do I deal with it? First of all, you have a perception of how you think I am, because you gotta understand, it's not just the public got to watch out for that guy. Black officers have to watch out for that guy. Okay, this was not just this is not just something that, okay, because you got the blue uniform on. No, you don't get no special treatment. You might, how they deal with you, you get all the crappy assignments. You get thrown on a shift. You know, you can tell what in priority what shifts you want. They'll find some way to get around. If you got seniority, to get around you and put you on a shift, especially if you got somebody just flat out personally don't like you. Because you your own man, you'll stand up for what you believe is right and you'll fight for what you believe is right. Oh, they're gonna try to make an example because they don't want nobody else to think they can do that and get away with it. So, but you have to rise above it. And you have to show yourself, even in the face of being discriminated against, you got to show yourself and prove that you can be indiscriminate and treat people like they're supposed to be treated. And that's hard. It's hard, especially it's harder when you're not getting support from if you're Black, the Black public, and if you're white, the white public, because sometimes white guys get mistreated because they're trying to treat people right. And they're doing the job the way they should do it. They get mistreated. And if a Black person won't say nothing, you know, you just added, you're asking for something that he's doing or he or she is doing. And on top of that, you're not even supporting it. So when that person no longer exists, what did you do to encourage that to keep going? And that's where a lot of my work was not just watching to make sure Black people are treated right by white people, but also to make sure Black people are culturally aware enough to understand, hey, it was about being right and doing things right. You took that as race. Your race ain't got nothing to do with it. You can't stay next door to me and behave like that. So when you take the issue of race out of it, when it's not there, that's where, fair and impartial policing, even fair and impartial justice from people, period. You got to want that if you say you want civil rights. When the Jim Crow laws became prevalent throughout the South and law enforcement was used pretty much to hunt down slaves, well, when the civil rights movement was launched in the South, you were no more than just a glorified slave police, because pretty much your efforts, whether you did it personally or collectively, was oppressing people. So that's why when they don't want you to get into the equity theory training, especially in law enforcement and judicial system, because it has to recognize for decades and even centuries, they have turned a blind eye towards justice to all human beings. One of the things we have to look at is that shootings, period, are a lot of times sensationalized, and they're tried publicly before any factual information can go through the judicial system, and because there's a greater demand for it. So now you're trying to balance the demand for public knowledge of what's going on versus the accountability of the court system, which all of them got loopholes. Because now, the pen becomes mightier than the sword. So now if I'm working for a media that's anti-law enforcement, I can get a very slanted coverage of this. And at the end of the day, everybody that followed it gets bamboozled on to find out. And I'll give you a case in point, Tawana Brawley. You remember that? That was the old New York City police rape case where she claimed that she was raped by police officers, and it became a nationwide issue before Facebook and all the social media. And then when it came down to it, she admitted that she was lying and it didn't happen. So now, when we don't get the closure from a lot of things that are hype, it still goes down as a documented issue of wrongdoing. But 10, 20 years ago, there was an article written in the Chief of Police magazine talking about supervision, especially in terms of handling corruption and corrupt officers. Your breakdown in accountability starts and ends at supervision. If a supervisor will call it like it is, he puts administration on public display, and he may be targeted. And most supervisors now in the agency have unions to protect supervisors. But man, it's a tough situation because they're not gonna want to air this out publicly. But behind the scene, there are wars that you will never hear about unless you're in that inner circle. And believe me, wives and relatives of those officers will hear about that stuff. And sometimes it gets out there and they say, is that true? Well, yeah, some of that is true and accurate. I don't know where you got it from, but yeah, that did happen. And there are times that cover-ups take place from administrative levels, because now your mayors, your county commissioners, your state representatives, all of these big wielding power politicians get involved in it. And most officers now, what they want to know is what the rules are so that they can earn their money and provide for their family and stay out of the hoopla. Now, some of them say, hey, that's the only way you're going to move up. You got to get involved in the politics. Well, when the politics becomes dirty, there are integrity issues. As I go higher and higher in my life and my career, I found myself each level building a certain amount of resilience that takes you to the next level. And along the way, you're going to meet people that's going to help you, that don't look like you, and you're going to meet people that's going to hurt you that look just like you, and say things that you think that's going to help you, make you feel safe and secure. So you had to be a better judge of character of people, period, and not fall for the bait of deception. And that's what makes the job less desirable, because the question becomes, okay, is this all I'm going to make? Then what person in their right mind is going to go in here? And you got to look at how law enforcement officers have been recruited for decades. You know, even now, they want to show you the SWAT entry, drug bust. They want to show you all the raids with the high-power rifles. But what they're not going to tell you is that when they go into a white neighborhood, their life is just as much in danger. Matter of fact, it's more in danger because it's a greater tendency to relax too soon than it is in a neighborhood where it's a white officer in a black neighborhood. But most white officers know that when you go in a black neighborhood and you get to know the people, good and bad, in that neighborhood, you have a sense of safety in there because you know there's some people going to look out for you. Where recruitment actually starts at the top. And one of the ways you empower people to help you recruit is through your relationships. I went through a lot of controversial challenges, even as police chief, and there were numerous times where the community stepped in and they were like a bailout, because then the person that was really trying to push this agenda realized, I'm not just going against him, but I'm going against a lot of people, black, white, brown, that know him a lot more than we know him, and he's been consistent. So then it makes them back off. And certainly the recruitment issue came up when I was running for sheriff, because people knew that, number one, I'm going to create an environment that's going to be conducive to a good relationship between the staff, the leadership, and the officers, as well as a good relationship between the community and the officers. And because I'm going to be out there, and they know I'm going to be out there and involved in it. So now, when you know that that's what could happen, that's why they're going to try, people who might resent the idea of that is going to try to get you to fall out with community policing. In other words, if you start kicking doors in and you're raiding, you're traumatizing children, you're raiding houses, you got guys going out wielding guns, and kids are screaming, not to mention if shots are fired. There's no relationship between those guys and those people when they go in that neighborhood. So if I've never seen you before, I don't know you as Officer Mike or Officer Tim or Officer Sean. All I know is you're a policeman and you came and kicked my door in. So now my thing is, everybody that wear that uniform like yours, I got an issue with it because it's been traumatizing. I've had nothing but traumatizing experience. But when you use the contact theory that I pushes in community policing, the more positive interactions you have between any two opposing groups, you building a basis of understanding. And then when there is a problem, believe me, then have more positive interactions, and there's a basis to resolve it. My faith kicked in and became a very instrumental piece in balancing, because then when I got saved, I was expecting to be at most a good deacon that faithfully worked in the church and supported leadership and chimed in and chipped in. And what I saw was a progression into leadership positioning by both the piety as well as the presbytery. And my faith has kept me in balance and willing to see and to reevaluate what is the current reality in the world, what is the current truths, what are the current challenges, what challenges are not going to change. It's always going to be challenges between law enforcement and particularly communities of color until it changes from the top and it becomes a daily practice. In other words, now I got to get along with you because everything I'm going to come in contact demands